that the committee's amendments put to the vote yesterday, the mistake has been confirmed. Our next item is Council and Commission statements on the rule of law and the potential approval of the Polish National Recovery Plan. Please respect the first 2 rows for the group leaders. You can use the blue card in line with the rules. Once you have inserted your voting cards, I should remind you that you must use the central rostrum and follow the rules of procedure. The first speaker on behalf of the Council will be Minister Zacharopoulou. You have the floor, Madam.
Monsieur le Vice-Président, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. Vice President, and President of the Commission, Honourable Members, thank you for inviting the Council to this debate. Our shared values, such as democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights, are the cornerstone of the European Union. And that applies particularly in the exceptional circumstances we're facing as a result of the military aggression undertaken by Russia against Ukraine. The French presidency in office of the Council has included the item of the rule of law on the agenda of the Council on a number of occasions. And we're speaking in this plenary, as we have done on a number of occasions in relevant committees, so that we can address the many issues surrounding the rule of law and inform you of the actions undertaken within the Council. As far as Poland is concerned, on the 22nd of February, we had a hearing during the General Council under the terms of Article 7 of the Treaty. On that occasion, it was recalled once again the fundamental importance of fully implementing the rulings of the Court of Justice of the European Union, in particular concerning the Disciplinary Chamber of the Polish Supreme Court. We are expecting the 3rd annual report on the rule of law from the Commission by July, and once again I wish to compliment it for the fine work it's been doing. That report will be an important element in future debate within the Council. The recovery and relaunch facility, as the EU's response to the COVID pandemic, shows a clear will on Europe's part to bring about the green and digital transition. Unprecedented solidarity commits us to using these funds in a responsible, effective fashion on the basis of credible, healthy financing. I welcome the fact that the Commission has already raised more than 100 billion Next Generation EU funds and has given rise to lively interest amongst international investors. The facility provides a unique opportunity to bolster the coordination of investment and reform across the European Union. Our purpose is therefore to ensure that all plans are adopted and implemented as quickly as possible. The plans must help overcome the challenges we have noted on the basis of relevant country-by-country recommendations, including references to the rule of law. All the member states have to set up systems to prevent, detect and put right any corruption and fraud or conflicts of interest in the use of funds allocated under the facility. Once a plan is adopted, each member state concerned must ensure that the EU's rules are respected, particularly the financial regulation and the regulation on the general conditionality regime for protecting the EU budget. The Council is ready to examine the Commission's proposal on the approval of the Recovery and Resilience Plan for Poland. The Council will also continue carefully to watch, just as we do with the plans that have already been adopted, to make sure that all the rules governing this, including respect for the rule of law, are properly applied. We will continue to monitor implementation in close cooperation with the European Parliament at every stage, so as to ensure that the facility is a success. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you, Minister. The next speaker is the President of the European Commission, Ms. von der Leyen. Do take the floor, Ms. von der Leyen.
Mr. President, Madame la Ministre, honourable members. Last week, the European Commission, after 1 year of negotiations, gave its green light to Poland's Recovery and Resilience Plan. Now Council has to decide, we just heard it. This plan will support the Polish people on their way to a more sustainable, digital and resilient future. This is a path we've all agreed on. But the plan will do more, and that's what we are debating here today. Because as in all recovery and resilience plans, there are investments linked to reforms. The approval of this plan is linked in particular to clear commitments by the Polish government on the independence of the judiciary. These commitments are intended to meet the 3 elements that I laid out to you last October in this hemicycle, and I laid them out again last week in Warsaw, so please allow me to reiterate them. First, the current disciplinary chamber must be abolished and replaced by an independent and impartial court established by law. That means the new disciplinary chamber must be substantially different. That's the term the ECJ has used. Substantially different from the current one to respond to the ECJ ruling. Second, the disciplinary regime has to be reformed. That means controversial disciplinary offences have to be removed. For example, the request to the ECJ, this is no more an offence, or the questioning of the status of another judge, this cannot be any more an offence. And third, all judges affected by the rulings of the disciplinary chamber shall have the right to have their case reviewed by the new chamber within a clear time frame and on the basis of the new regime, free from inappropriate offences. These are the 3 milestones. And let me be very clear. These 3 commitments, translated into milestones, must be fulfilled before any payment can be made. I know that some of you are skeptical, but let me assure that no money will be disbursed until these reforms are undertaken. The plan is public. So a first payment will only be possible when a new law is in force that ticks all the boxes under this contract. In addition, Poland must demonstrate by the end of 2023 that all unlawfully dismissed judges have been reinstated. If this is not the case, there cannot be any further disbursement. When delivered, this is progress, but we're not at the end of the road on the rule of law in Poland. Agreeing to Poland's recovery plan does not stop any of the other procedures concerning the rule of law in Poland. We will continue the ongoing infringement proceedings and we will not hesitate to start new ones if needed. The rulings of the Court of Justice concerning the disciplinary regime remain binding on Poland, and the Commission will continue to enforce the order of the Court and apply the daily penalty payments until the Polish government complies. The milestones in our plan are a safety net to the legal procedures of the Court. Honourable members, as you see, our strategy is to use all the instruments at our disposal to address all the rule of law issues in Poland. The full implementation of the milestones will lead to solving important issues related to the disciplinary regime as identified by the European Court of Justice. But the RRP does not replace the judgment. It is a safety net, as I said, for Poland's compliance with it. When we started our negotiations with the Polish government on the recovery plan in May 1 year ago, these commitments were not there. Our negotiations on the Next Generation EU triggered the necessary movement. Now the Polish Parliament is debating a new law, and unlawfully dismissed judges have a clear perspective to be reinstated. So is everything solved? No, certainly not. But now we have movement in the right direction and leverage so that it leads to the results needed. And finally, when I visited Warsaw last week, I made it very clear. When we are talking about Next Generation EU, we are talking about common European money, taxpayers' money. The European Parliament and Member States must be certain that this money is being spent in line with our rules and our values, everywhere in our Union. And we have given ourselves the instruments to make sure that the European budget is protected. Both the Parliament and the Commission have initiated Article 7 procedures. The Next Generation EU regulation allows us to push through necessary reforms as identified in the country-specific recommendations. This is hard work, this is a day-to-day struggle, this is our duty, and I call on all of us to work together in this challenging time to uphold and protect the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, President. We will start the debate with the speaker from the group of the European People's Party. First of all, Siegfried Mureşan for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, President von der Leyen, dear colleagues. President, thank you very much for coming to Parliament today, for your assurances and for your clear words. 2 years ago, dear colleagues, we have started work on the European Recovery and Resilience Facility. About 1 year ago, we adopted it and the process could start. We launched this facility to help people affected by coronavirus, to help enterprises and to help regions cope with the economic and social consequences of the virus. We are seeing in most member states of the Union already good progress. We see money starts flowing, investments can start, and reforms are also underway. In my country alone today, the government has signed contracts of refurbishing, renovating, modernizing schools with funds from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. There is good progress. Unfortunately, we have seen delays in Poland. Because in Poland the rule of law was under attack, the people of Poland could not yet profit from the Recovery and Resilience Facility as people in other EU member states have done. And this is a fact, but the situation now is that work starts between the European Commission and the government of Poland to reach a common understanding. The rule of law is important. We as a parliament, my group, we are all committed to this, and the message is clear. Money can only flow when money is safe. EU funds can only be paid when EU funds are safe, and this is why I say very clearly before this parliament, our group will not tolerate the release of a single euro from the Recovery and Resilience Facility until the Polish authorities comply with the rulings of the European Court of Justice. And we expect the European Commission to not disburse funds until the Polish authorities adopt the necessary legislation and prove that the course on which they embarked is irreversible. Legislation needs to be adopted, legislation needs to be implemented. And this is important to all of us, dear colleagues, because money from the RRF is money from the people of Europe for the people of Poland, and we have a duty to protect this money, to make sure it is well spent. We want to help the people of Europe, but we hope the government of Poland is not an obstacle in our desire to help the people of Poland, as we are also helping people of Europe in all other member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muresan. The next speaker on behalf of the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament is Irache García Pérez. For 2 minutes, you have the floor. Thank you, President. And thank you, President von der Leyen, for being with us here today in person to demonstrate the Commission's commitments to upholding the rule of law. As you all know, that is a priority for this House. It's an absolute priority. Now, of course, this is a difficult debate. It's another consequence of the authoritarian shift in Poland and the deterioration of its rule of law. On the one hand, we welcome the fact that the Polish government has, at long last, agreed that it has to dismantle its disciplinary chamber, doing away with the arbitrariness of that and its discriminatory penalty regime, which was punishing judges in line with their rulings, and they have to be reinstated. At the same time, we can see Mr. Morawiecki is still doing this. And that's why in our group we think that not a single penny must be disbursed until the rulings of the Court of Justice are fully enforced. Before disbursing money, we have to show that there's real change rather than just cosmetic tweaking. Rehabilitating judges doesn't just mean reviewing their cases, it means returning them to their positions and their special fields of expertise. And the Commission statement has not allayed all our concerns. The change has to be deep going and sustained. The Commission must stringently ensure that there's no backpedaling before the fund is dispersed. Our group will be extremely vigilant on this, and that applies to the rule of law conditionality mechanism, because the Commission cannot allow our levels of democracy to be lowered in Poland or any other member state. In winding up, I would say that in this war, with its serious economic and social circumstances, we admire the efforts and solidarity of Polish society in hosting refugees. That solidarity cannot be used as a bargaining chip to give the Polish government any special treatment in the fulfilment of the rule of law, because Polish citizens deserve nothing less, nor does the Union. Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of the Renew Europe group is Stéphane Séjourné for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Madam President of the Commission, thank you for joining us to discuss a very important issue, the rule of law, and that's really the cornerstone of our democracy, the cement of our society. The European Commission is the guardian of the treaties, and we in the Parliament are the watchmen. So we think that giving approval on the part of the Council would be a mistake. Yielding to blackmail on the part of the Polish government would be a mistake. We've had various debates on this. The conditions laid down are clear preconditions. They're not vague milestones which would be insufficient or cosmetic. As far as we're concerned, the rulings of the court need to be fully and comprehensively implemented, including the primacy of European law. Otherwise, we will have to bring new cases. Parliament will have to bring a new case. For my group, it's out of the question that a single euro is spent before the Polish judiciary is independent. That's always been clear on the part of this majority in the Parliament. And I think it's been understood by your Commission, Madam President. a single euro spent before the rule of law is re-established would mean that various levers could be used. This debate on the rule of law is absolutely fundamental for our Parliament. For our group, finally, direct management of European funds is the best solution, as you said. And I think your services, Madam President, need to look into this, look at the administration of delegated funds to see whether the conditions are respected or not. So we in my political group will always be against the drifting of the Polish government, but we stand by the Polish people.
Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of the Group of the Greens and European Free Alliance is Damian Böselager for 1.5 minutes.
Dear Minister, dear President von der Leyen, thanks first of all to come here and to be here in person for this crucial moment for our union. President, I said it to Prime Minister Morawiecki when he was here, and it has to be absolutely clear. Our union is based on treaties, and treaties need enforcement by a functioning justice system. And if we have political puppet courts in our member states, the laws that we write here are worth nothing. Now, you caved into the pressures and blackmailing of the Polish government, and we have seen absolutely zero improvement on the Polish side when it comes to their justice system, and you still recommended the recovery plan for approval. The majority of this House and some of your commissioners believe this to be a huge mistake, and we have little trust that the milestones you negotiated will prevent the Polish government from sanctioning and dismissing judges or flooding Polish courts with political appointees, and I think this actually falls behind your own criteria. Colleagues, to ensure that the rule of law is upheld, we have to do two things. First, we need to ensure that our national governments do not approve the Polish recovery plan until the judgments of the European Court of Justice and the European Court of Human Rights are implemented. And second, it needs to be clear that we will use all the tools available to us to make sure that the Commission does not approve any European taxpayers' money, as you have said, flowing to Poland without real reforms taking place. And yes, this also includes the tool to force the Commission to resign. We have to ensure a union where the treaties are upheld and the rule of law is in place. And so, President, please do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of Identity and Democracy Group, Nikolaus Fest, for 1 minute.
President, Madam President of the Commission, I'm grateful to the Commission for releasing money from the RRF, though most of it is German money, but releasing the funds is a good sign because it shows that there's a bit more common sense in the Commission. Poland hasn't promised anything. It has defended its sovereignty, and we don't understand why it's not a problem to have arbitrary appointment of judges in Germany, but the same thing leads to an Article 7 procedure in Poland. So there has been a success for Poland. It seems that now there's been a move to realpolitik rather than naivety, and we see what Poland has done, defending the refugees arriving at its borders. We're seeing what it does for security, and we shouldn't overburden the PIS government with new proceedings.
Thank you. Next, on behalf of the ECR group, Mr. Łygutko has 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, organizing such absurd debates, there have been many of them already. This seems to be a kind of spécialité de maison of this parliament, and that is below any standards of rational thinking. This debate is not only irrational, but it is really a completely absurd. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm addressing MEPs from countries other than Poland. You don't know anything about Poland. One of you mentioned the Disciplinary Chamber, and you were so happy that it has been dissolved. But you don't know what this Disciplinary Chamber is doing. And Poland, I heard that Poland has an authoritarian government. Is this an authoritarian government? We have much more freedom than Spain, which is ruled by extremely oppressive government. What are you saying here? You have no knowledge about it. This is a total ignorance which fuels your ideological hatred and which I, as an observer of political and public life, I can understand it, of course, but I'm very sorry about it. Well, not a long time ago, one of our MEP colleagues said that Poland should be cut off funds just to starve for funding. So I understand that the Parliament has also this strategy of financial starving. Well, starving has very bad connotations. It relates to very unpleasant political traditions, and it sounds terrible to a Polish ear, but the truth is that this is the strategy of the Parliament, and I must say that's very sad. But I'm struck with this really language that you are using and these fake terms that you are using when you say democracy. This has nothing to do with democracy, but it's a domination of one group and one view of the world. When you speak about the values, it's really about blackmailing. I'm really disgusted with this. When in 2004 Poland joined the European Union, even the biggest opponents to the European Union at that time couldn't imagine this what's going on here. So, ladies and gentlemen, this will bear consequences.
Thank you. Next, on behalf of the left group, Nikolai Willumsen has the floor for 2 minutes.
Dear President of the European Commission, when I heard the Commission decided to give more than 30 billion euros to Poland, I was surprised. Surprised because there is no clear confirmation that Poland now fully complies with the rule of law. Surprised that several relevant commissioners clearly were not involved in the process. Surprised to see that the Commission President ignored the vocal protests of her colleagues. Surprised that you choose to ignore the explicit demands and resolutions of this Parliament, not to give in to pressure. And not least surprised that you are willing to sacrifice our basic principles. Dear colleagues, dear Commission, I say we cannot compromise on rule of law or the respect of basic democratic freedoms within the EU. It is simply not acceptable. So where do we go from here? It is clear to me that if the Commission insists on this misguided course, if it decides to neglect its duties and to ignore the Court and the European Parliament, and if it seriously decides that rule of law is optional for Member States, then we will have to take the necessary measures, because in that case, we clearly cannot have confidence in the Commission anymore. Dear President, I urge you to live up to your responsibilities. If not, you are no longer fit for your role.
Thank you. The next speaker is non-attached member Balázs Hidvégi for 1.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister, President. Dear colleagues, I welcome the decision, the long-awaited decision to approve Poland's recovery plan. This confirms that all previous accusations were nothing other than political hysteria whipped up against the right-wing Conservative government of Poland. Once again, it's unacceptable that the left-wingers in this parliament call into question the rightness of this decision and continue with their ideological attacks. It's high time that the European left realise that mean-minded ideological debates are out of place at the moment when we're faced with a terrible war in our immediate neighbourhood. The war in Ukraine has shaken us profoundly, and it has created a political and security situation which is entirely new. Furthermore, Europe is faced with an economic, food, energy and refugee crisis which is utterly unprecedented. We therefore need to deal with these issues with great unity and unwavering strength. It is entirely irresponsible, I would say it's suicidal, to turn member states one against the other in the current situation. What we need is mutual trust and respect, and not ill-considered attacks against leaders and governments which defend their sovereignty, conviction and national interests. A few words in Polish now to show my respect for Poland.
Poland is a strong and healthy democratic country. It should immediately obtain all the European funds that it should get. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Andrzej Halicki for 1.5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam President, you should decide who is lying, who is arrogant. You have a chance to compare. And I'm also here as a representative of society, of Polish society, which is really waiting those billions which should serve our economy, our local governments, our companies. Polish government has wasted a year because Prime Minister Morawiecki was talking about exactly these 3 points that you mentioned, Madam President. So we lost 13% and a lot of time. That's why what we need is the document that was presented in Warsaw. 300 pages of implementation decisions. I want to tell you, page 200, 201, 202 and 203. These are the 4 pages related to the procedure of the disciplinary procedures and the European Court of Justice decisions, the whole system, the changes in the regulations in the Sejm, in the Senate, all this. And I think you can trust me here. Polish society is really waiting for the calendar that also the Polish government has signed up to, with the final dates, so end of June, very soon, so that this calendar was implemented, because it is the only chance to finish this crisis, to end this crisis which serves no one. Because if you attack the European Commission, you are making Europe weaker and you are not helping the government to fulfill its obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. I would invite colleagues to respect their speaking time. Next, the Vice President Katarina Barley will take the floor for 1 minute.
Chair, Madam President, the Commission is not even demanding the bare minimum from the Warsaw government. The reforms the Commission asks for will not bring the Polish judiciary back in line with the rule of law. And most importantly, there are even no signs that Warsaw will make a serious attempt to fulfill the milestone. The currently pending reform of the Disciplinary Chamber of the Supreme Court will not be enough to comply with ECJ judgments. And we all see it, the problems that the PiS government created go much deeper. The milestones leave major rule of law problems in Poland completely unaddressed. The Polish Constitutional Tribunal has become a puppet of the PiS government. It delivers judgments at the order of the government. In 2 judgments already, it has openly attacked the supremacy of EU law. The Polish National Council of the Judiciary, again, is a puppet of the PiS government. It appoints judges at the order of the government. And my question is, if you accept now a new disciplinary chamber, they will also be composed by illegally appointed judges, so-called non-judges. So does the Commission now accept these judges as legal? Only today, the remaining and continuously fighting lawyers and judges associations in Poland have demanded again for the Commission to start infringement proceedings in relation to the National Council of the Judiciary, and I call on the Commission today to take up her duty as the guardian of the treaties.
Ms. Barley, would you stay, please, for a moment? Would you accept the blue card from Mr. Tarczynski, Dominic? Yes. And send one more, so we'll be
Dziękuję bardzo. Najczęściej mówię w języku angielskim.
Thank you very much. I usually speak English.
To będzie dla mnie wielka duma, jeżeli mogę.
But I'd like to speak Polish to you. Well, I understand that you have the translation. I'd like to ask you whether it is true that these are your words that Poles should be cut off funds, that they should start starving for these funds. Have you ever said that? Are you aware how they resonate in Poland, where people were starving to death under the Nazi regime? Are you aware of how Poles and Jews who were starving during the war, how they felt? Are you going to apologize for these words? I rarely speak Polish in this chamber, but now I'm proud to use my language.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to answer this question. I have answered it about 1 million times, and you all know it, because we have even had a written procedure over this. The answer is no. I have never said that. I used the word, but I used it in relation with corruption in Hungary. And maybe if you are aware of the situation in Hungary, and you know where the money, the European money, goes in Hungary, what I said was we should drain. Well, I can say it in German. I can say den Sumpf austrocknen.
We have to dry out the swamp.
That's what I said. I did say nothing about Poland in relation to this word, and you know it. Mr. Legutko knows it, and you keep repeating the same lie, and I know that you will only put your own passage on social media and not my reply. I've said that about 1 million times. You can even hear it if you repeat. It was a radio interview, you can even hear it.
Thank you, but may I ask you to stay, Ms. Barley, if you... it seems, Bogdan Johnsa, your question will not be taken by Ms. Barley, so... Or you would like to take, because one more question, so I ask you to stay, please. Would you accept one more question to Bogdan Johnsa? So you are welcome back. So Mr. Johnsa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much that you agreed to answer my question. My question is the following. Don't you think that all these attacks against Poland, in the situation of what the Poles are doing, how they are helping the refugees from Ukraine, isn't it true that this is something that is seen very positively in Moscow, in Russia? Don't you think that Putin is glad he's opening his champagne bottle that Poland is weakened economically by the fact of not getting the money that it should be getting from the RRF? Do you realize that Poland, working on the east, also on behalf of NATO, is extremely important also economically to protect the European Union, and your attacks against Poland are serving Putin's interests? Do you realize that? Thank you.
Thank you again. I acknowledge very much the efforts that the Polish people are doing at the moment in relation to Ukrainian refugees. What Polish people are doing is heroic. This has nothing to do with the question of the rule of law, and it is entirely in your hands. It is entirely in the hands of the Polish government to release the money. You only have to comply to the rule of law. It's very easy. And I've always said, I'm very much in favor of giving money to the Polish government because of the refugees, because it costs a lot. It costs the government, it costs the state, it costs the people. We should give money to Poland to care for the refugees. But that is a completely different question. What the Polish government, I have to say, because I have the greatest respect for the Polish people, what the Polish government is doing is destroying the independence of the judiciary, and that has been going on for 5 years now. So it is entirely in the hands of you, politicians like you, to change this. And then, of course, the money will be released.
Thank you very much. We continue now with Róża Thun for 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Well, the fact that in the European Parliament we have such stormy debates about Poland only testifies to the fact how important our country is to you, dear colleagues. The fact that we asked for the meeting with Madam President after she has signed the National Recovery Plan testifies to the fact that observing the rule of law in the entire EU is extremely important to us, colleagues, Commission, Council, people, NGOs, companies, healthcare. They all need these EU funds. That's true, but I'd like to remind you of one minor aspect. We were fighting against an authoritarian government in Poland. We were fighting for being a part of this community of the European Union because that guarantees the rule of law, democracy, freedom. The European Union is a guarantee of observing law, of the division of power and free independent courts. Our Polish institutions are very young and not resilient enough to attacks of those who want to damage them. That's why the community of values is even more important, the community of the rule of law. And you, Madam President, you are the guardian of this community. This is what we expect of you, and this is what we demand of you.
Wir wissen alle, wohin es führt, wenn wir weich und tolerant gegenüber.
But we know what happens if we're weak towards authoritarian regimes which break our common agreements and rules. That happened far too long with Fidesz and Viktor Orban, and we see how much it costs us today and what he's doing to our union. You're aware of history, Madam President. We know where dictatorship and not complying with the rules can lead. We have heard Ukraine mentioned on various occasions. They are fighting for the rule of law. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sylvia Spurek for 1 minute.
Igor Tuleya and Paweł Juszczyszyn. These are judges which cannot practice their profession now. Bart Staszewski, who is LGBTQI activist, who is taken to court. Justyna Dobrzyńska, who is a women's rights defender, has a case in court. There are others. Some are accused of blasphemy. And these are stories about rules of law in Poland. People fighting for such values, they deserve our support and solidarity, and they were counting on the EU. And now the European Commission was monitoring, was recommending, and right now it has capitulated. It lost with Kaczynski, with Orban and other populists. There are MEPs here who are talking about a vote of no confidence against the Commission. And maybe they are right, because the challenges of this term are too high for the Commission. It did not protect our values, it does not fight with climate disaster, it does not fight for women LGBTI people.
Thank you. Next, Herman Tertsch has the floor for 1 minute. Thank you, President. The fact is that many here are referring to history, but they don't seem to recall that blackmailing Poland with money when they're hosting 4 million refugees, mainly because Germany is not doing its bit, because it's sabotaging the heroic resistance efforts of Ukraine. Germany is systematically sabotaging things. That's why Poland is in the condition it's in. Now we see the Germans threatening the Poles, threatening the Hungarians because they're not behaving properly. Well, have you said anything about the violations of the independence of the judiciary in Spain? Can't you see how the socialist, communist government in Spain is walking all over the independence of the judiciary? When you have someone who was the Minister of Justice using the justice system brutally against anyone who complains against it because of corruption. No one's complaining about that. There's Mr. Sanchez asking Ms. von der Leyen for money. She comes to Spain and says, Mr. Sanchez is wonderful, what a great job Sanchez is doing. Sanchez is shameful. The speaker's mic has been cut off.
Next speaker would be Laura Ferrara for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, President. So the go-ahead of almost 36 billion euros for Poland is showing up a very hypocritical attitude on the part of the EU. The rule of law is supposed to be defended, but despite the Article 7 proceedings dating from 2017, the situation has got worse. Mention has been made of the primacy of European law and the European Convention on Human Rights. And the European Parliament's resolutions, the problems highlighted there and by the court have not been solved. For example, the restitution of judges who have lost their jobs, and then there's the question of the conditionality mechanism to deal with rule of law breaches. We are aware of the major contribution made when taking in Ukrainian refugees, but we could also recall attacks on freedom of the press and civil liberties. 5 commissioners do not approve of the approval of the plan, and they're critical of the milestones which should solve the problem of the lack of independence of the Polish judiciary. The Commission is responsible for ensuring the rule of law, it's guardian of the treaties, and if there is no rule of law, this will undermine the role of the Commission and the credibility of the European citizens and the trust of citizens.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jeroen Lenaers for 1.5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We cannot and will not allow our common values to be put at risk. The Commission will act. These were your words, Madam President, in this House in October last year during the debate on Poland. And those words were accompanied by clear demands, and you mentioned them today as well. The dismantling of the Disciplinary Chamber ending the disciplinary regime for Polish judges, and the reinstatement of dismissed judges. Now, more than 6 months have passed since our debate in October, plenty of time for the Polish government to show genuine commitment and implement the ECJ rulings, plenty of time to meet minimum standards, as all member states of the EU must. However, sadly, 6 months later, none of this has happened. And despite this, the Polish RRF plan has now officially been approved. And this has simply been the wrong sequence. As much as there is something to say for jointly agreed milestones with strict deadlines, these conditions should have been fulfilled before the endorsement of the plan for Poland, which would have also given the Commission more time to evaluate the actual implementation of these commitments in practice. Fundamental values and the rule of law, much like ECJ rulings, cannot be the subject of negotiations. And we therefore expect a clear commitment today from the Commission that you will indeed act, that not a single euro will be transferred to the Polish government until there is a genuine, complete and irreversible implementation of the milestones, execution of the ECJ rulings and full respect for the primacy of EU law. Nothing less will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker would be either Gardia Zabal Rubial for 1.5 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, President. President von der Leyen, I'm sure you won't be surprised that this upbeat assessment of the plan of the Polish government has been greeted by us with considerable doubts, because we're all aware of the inadequacies in the plan. The proof of that is the 3 months it's taken you to give it the green light. In this Parliament, we've adopted any number of resolutions speaking out against the systematic violation of the rule of law by the Morawiecki government. You, in the Commission, as guardians of the treaty, are responsible for the enforcement of European legislation, subject to the oversight of the Court of Justice of the European Union. We in the European Parliament are in charge of scrutinising the Commission's work. The RRF plan clearly has to fulfil 11 requirements in order to get a positive assessment, and that includes the recommendations of the European semester on the independence, quality and efficiency of the judicial system. I won't repeat the conditions which have not been fulfilled. That's already been mentioned by a number of speakers. All the conditions in the plan have to be delivered on. Some have to be fulfilled by the end of this month. Given that there are 23 days left, I would have thought that the Council could wait before taking its final decision. Be that as it may, what has to be very clear is that unless those requirements are fulfilled, we cannot transfer a single euro. Lastly, the values of the European Union are the cornerstone of the Union, and as such, we must maintain an unbending position. In defence of this, we have the regulation on the law of order conditionality, and that must not be forgotten. The President, thank you. Sophie Inetveldt is the next speaker for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam President, it is right you came here today, because this chamber is the place where the Commission is held to account, here and nowhere else. Colleagues, 14. No less than 14 resolutions on the rule of law in Poland have been adopted by this House. They were all ignored by the European Commission. So what magical effect do we expect from number 15? The Commission ignores Parliament, the rulings of the highest European courts, the letters of dissent of 5 commissioners ignored, its own Article 7 procedure against Poland ignored, the calls from Polish civil society, warnings by judicial authorities in other member states ignored. Instead, President von der Leyen, you travelled to Warsaw last week for a shiny ceremony with the Prime Minister, who, as soon as you had left, hastened to say the judiciary in Poland is fine, as we heard here today by Mr. Legutko and his colleagues. So the guardian of the treaties is no longer upholding the rule of law, it's holding up a facade. The milestones are a smokescreen and fall short of the standards called for by the European Court of Justice. 3 things: implementation, full implementation and irreversible of all ECJ rulings. reinstatement of the unlawfully dismissed judges, recognition of the primacy of EU law. Those are the real criteria and nothing less. Colleagues, it is our duty as a European Parliament to hold the Commission to account. A critical Parliament is not the problem. A silent Parliament is. And politics, colleagues, is not for the faint-hearted. Are we a watchdog or are we a lapdog? In 2019, this House, Madam President, gave you its vote of confidence, and so did I. But a vote of confidence is meaningless if it's irreversible, because it leaves us without leverage. And for me, it is clear. If you make any payment to Poland without all the criteria having been fully met, you lose my confidence. It's democracy. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Mrs. Reinke. Yes, apparently it is Mrs. Reinke. Sorry.
Colleagues, I think
Und nochmal Entschuldigung, wir haben eine Blue Card.
And I'm sorry.
Herr Kemper. To whom would you direct your blue card, Madam Kemper? To Sophie Inetfeld. Would you accept? Sorry, Terry. Okay, so, Terry, please.
Dear colleagues, I think it has to be said here very clearly, what the Commission did last week was a big political and strategic mistake. And I think there is no dancing around it, because even large parts of the Commission seem to agree with that. And now it is actually on the Council to show some spine and not to adopt the RRP for Poland until the pre-given conditions are going to be met. And may I remind this House that actually these conditions are not specific political requirements. They should actually not be conditions at all, because they should just be self-evident facts that everybody in the European Union can take for granted, to comply with rulings of the European Court of Justice. Now, the European Commission does not seem to think that they are bound by the treaties, but I have to break it to you. You are. And unless you find back that clarity, Madam President, this Parliament is going to be ready to do what it takes to make sure that Article 2 of the treaties is going to be safeguarded. Thank you.
Thank you. Now our colleague Fernandes.
Thank you, President. President of the Commission, having you here shows commitment. I have no doubt that you'll do everything necessary to ensure that the rule of law is respected in the European Union. But turning to the other side, Mr. Macron should have been here. No one has mentioned the fact that if there are suspensions, it's the Council that has to endorse the suspensions. It's the Council has to adopt the RRF. So we know what the Commission's position is, but I'd like to know what the Council's position is. Is it going to adopt this without conditions? Will it suspend the payments? What majorities are there in the Council? The parliamentary leaders here have spoken out on their positions. I'm talking about the S&D and the Renew Group. There is no doubt that the rule of law and European values are our common heritage, and we all need to protect and cherish them, and it's unacceptable that a member state can fail to respect the European values that it has to embrace in order to join in the first place. If the government is not respecting European values, of course it cannot be funded from the European budget or from the Recovery and Resilience Plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Belka.
Pani Przewodnicząca.
Madam President, we all sitting here, we know that Poland needs this money from the National Recovery Plan, and I don't think anybody would question that. Nevertheless, not everything is for sale. Well, and the rule of law is one of such values, and I do hope that the changes in the law on the Supreme Court in Poland, discussed by the higher chamber of the parliament and also adopted by the senators from the ruling party, will have positive impact upon Polish judiciary. But we will soon see what the real intentions of the Polish government were. If these amendments are from the Senate are rejected by the lower chamber, that will mean that they ridiculed the European Commission. I do hope that money will be disbursed for Poland when milestones are met. Otherwise, there will be still this debate in Poland against the European Union and against Poland in it. Well, we in the European Parliament, we also know the rules of the game.
Thank you. Next is our colleague Aye.
Madam President, like many of my colleagues, and I gather several of your commissioners too, I think your decision to approve the Polish recovery plan is an unacceptable retreat. But it's a simple question. What tangible evidence is there that progress has been made by the PIS government to return to the rule of law since October, when you yourself set 3 clear conditions in order to give the green light? Have independent judges penalised by the government been reinstated? No. Has the Polish government dissolved the Disciplinary Chamber, which destroys the livings of those judges who enforce European law? No. Has the Polish government ended its reform of the justice system, which allows it to place party leaders within the system? Again, the answer is no. Clearly, the conditions have not been fulfilled, Madam President, to transfer a single euro to Poland, given the extent to which the most basic democratic principles are being flouted. The freedom of the press, the independence of the judiciary, everyone's rights, particularly women's rights. The Commission must honour its primary mission to enforce the rule of law and, above all, to protect our democracies. It's your responsibility, Madam President, towards Polish women and men who are fighting for their freedom every day. Together with my whole group, I shall be unbending in the authoritarianship of the Polish government. We were elected in 2019 to bring an end to liberalism, not to support it. Thank you.
Next speaker is our colleague Utterson.
Madam President, we do not support the decision to approve the Polish plan. The instruments to defend the rule of law was one of the major achievements of recent years. I'm not talking about punishing Polish citizens. Those responsible for money not arriving in Poland are in the Polish government. That needs to be made very clear. But a mistake is being made. This is a decision which is not supported by the majority of the College of Commissioners. Maybe you're worried about Poland taking you to court. I don't think they'd get anywhere, because you have a margin for action to protect the rule of law. The only thing that remains for us to do is be extremely vigilant, because there is a serious risk otherwise for the Commission to be censured. And so I would urge you to be very, very vigilant, otherwise you'll be censured by Parliament, Commission.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Ferber. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, Madam President. Dear colleagues, this conflict about the RFF plans of Hungary and Poland have lasted more than a year. We have to recognize that Poland in past weeks has made a step towards us, and we should recognize that. and that should also provide an example for Hungary. Nonetheless, I have to say quite clearly, this is a very complicated situation, multi-head situation for the European Commission. On the one hand, they have to say they have to fulfill all the rules of the rule of law, and that is the absolute condition for release of the funds. Now, Poland has made progress, but they haven't cleared up all the problems. The Commission has still approved the Polish plan. However, so they're almost there, but not yet, and it's another going to emphasize that there's not going to be any money flowing before all the conditions are fulfilled. In order to get the funds, we have now milestones within the plans. So once again, the goal line has been pushed forward a bit. So we can't do this again. When we're talking about the rule of law, you can't be flexible. The Commission seems as though it's working with a carrot and stick, but with the carrot and forgetting the stick, that's not a strategy. And we've seen this with other plans. There's much too much carrots and not enough stick. And so I just call upon you to really look and don't release the funds till all the conditions are met. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. López Aguilar. Thank you, Madam President. President von der Leyen, when the Commission announces that it's going to authorize the disbursement of 24 billion in grants and 11.5 billion in loans, what you're doing is going against what has been set out before. It's a form of solidarity, this RRF. Is it too much to ask for Poland to comply with the rule of law? You're saying that 3 conditions have to be complied with: dismantling the disciplinary chamber, reviewing the disciplinary procedures, and reinstating the judges that were dismissed or suspended by the disciplinary chamber. None of these requirements have been met. If those requirements are not met, it's not just a question of calling the disciplinary chamber something different. It needs to be dismantled. Obviously, this Parliament acknowledges Poland's efforts in the face of the repercussions of Russia's war against Ukraine, but that doesn't mean that we should look the other way. If there is blatant disregard of the rule of law, the judgments of the Court of Justice, and judicial independence, as well as human rights issues. So, have we seen any other European state asking for a ruling that European law is incompatible with its constitution? If the requirements are not complied with, Parliament has its resolutions.
Do you accept a blue card by colleague Bogusław Liberacki?
Tylko pytanie, twój przedmówca był uprzejmy powiedzieć, że Polska wykonała krok dużo bardziej do przodu niż Węgry. Czy potwierdzasz tego typu opinie, że Polska...
Do you confirm that Poland has taken a step forward in comparison with Hungary? Do you agree? Do you agree that Poland has made progress?
Both of them, Hungary and Poland, are member states of the European Union. They are bound exactly by the same rules and by the same law than the rest of us, but the rest of the member states of the European Union. This European Parliament represents 10 million Hungarian citizens in their European citizenship. This European Parliament represents 40 million Polish citizens in their Polish citizenships. So it is our wish that the Polish government not only says that it's willing to comply, it has the intention to comply, that maybe would consider to comply. We want both Hungary and Poland to comply. And as long as they don't comply, we have a case here. That is why we put in place Article 2. That is why we put in place the procedure of Article 7. That is why we're expecting finally Poland to abide by the rulings of the European Court of Justice and the Convention and the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Insofar as it is not the case, and particularly it does not comply with the Disciplinary Chamber being dismantled, we have a case. That is the principle. So we only hope that Poland and Hungary will finally make it and understand that they are bound by the same rules and by the same law than the rest of the member states and by the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Körner.
Vielen Dank, Frau Vizepräsidentin, liebe Kolleginnen und
Thank you very much, Madam President, colleagues. It sounds good. 3 clear conditions the Polish government has to fulfill. But the conclusion is the wrong one. There should still be conditions and not milestones when it comes to deciding whether the money should be released. Following the debate here, you see that the right in the European Parliament are celebrating this as a great victory, and they say it's a left-wing narrative about rule of law in Poland. And normally, the right here talk a lot of nonsense, but it seems at the moment that they may have a point. You've divided your commission. 2 commissioners who know the subject were not in favor of this decision. I do wonder what exactly you had in mind. President von der Leyen, I want you to stand firm. I voted for you as the future guardian of the treaties, but you have to remain guardian of the treaties. And if money is being transferred to Poland without there being rule of law in Poland, then you've lost my confidence. Thanks. Next to speak is Tineke Strik.
Council, Commissioner, President of the Commission. Court of Justice ruling on the retirement ages of judges, not implemented. Court of Justice ruling on the Disciplinary Chamber, not implemented. Court of Justice ruling on a disciplinary regime for judges, not implemented. Court of Justice ruling on the independence of judges, not implemented. European Court of Human Rights judgment on the right to a fair trial, not implemented. President, last year you spoke the following words in our House, and I quote, "Our values are guaranteed by our legal order and safeguarded by the judgments of the European Court of Justice. And we make sure that they are respected, and we will never waver in that determination." But by transferring 36 million euros to the Polish government, you will undermine the Polish rule of law, the European legal order, but also our confidence in your capacity as guardian of the treaties. And please don't let this happen. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Sarvamaa.
Next speaker, Mr. Sarvamaa.
Poland has been at the forefront of the European Union in helping Ukraine from day one. It has led by example and shown great European solidarity. It has received millions of women and children fleeing the war and provided Ukraine with financial and material support. But, Madam President, this is another ballgame that we are talking about. The fundamental pillar of the European Union is the rule of law. We simply cannot compromise on that under any circumstances. And in the midst of crisis, its importance and protection are even more important if possible. So in this respect, there is no alternative but to fully comply with the rulings of the European Court of Justice regarding the rule of law in Poland. They must be implemented to the last point before any money is finally released from the RRF. And that's not even enough. What's more, the Commission has to have solid evidence that the measures taken by Poland actually respect the rule of law, that are permanent and that they are credible and that they are full stop. So this is the only way to ensure that the Union stands by its principles and that the legitimacy of our actions remains in the eyes of Europeans, because I have to be very frank here. Last week was humiliating. One member state, Hungary, held the whole Union hostage. And now, if the next thing that would happen would be another member state holding the European Court of Justice rulings hostage, the Europeans know what they are looking at. They understand this. We don't have time to do this forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Birgit Sippel.
Vielen Dank. Seit Jahren schadet die polnische
Thank you very much.
Demokratie.
For years, Poland's PIS government has been trampling democracy and fundamental rights in its own country. Under Franz Timmermans, the Commission seemed to be resolute. But unfortunately, nothing has happened despite clear Court of Justice rulings since the launch of the Article 7 procedure. This could have been changed with the RRF. After all, the Commission could have insisted on its own principles, starting with reform. And that means the ball is in the Polish government's court. It can determine whether or not the money will flow. However, approving Poland's national recovery plan means that von der Leyen wants to change the rules. She wants to overrule two of her vice presidents, and 3 other commissioners who were against don't seem to have been taken into account. Poland has received money from the Refugee Fund and the Border Instrument because of all its help to Ukraine. But the fact is, we have fundamental values to do with democracy and rule of law, and the question is whether or not we take those seriously. And if only that were just a rhetorical question. Thank you.
Danke sehr. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege.
Thank you very much. Mr. Freund is next.
Danke, Frau Vorsitzende.
Thank you very much. The European Union was founded in order to prevent war in Europe. Common legislation and a court of justice that could implement these laws. That is the very basis of the European state or the European Union. So you've got the law rather than the law of the strongest, and that's what Poland is calling into question. Poland is ignoring the Court of Justice and the treaties. The obvious question is this: in this war situation, should we say that the unity of European countries is more important than the rule of law? I think if we say that the rule of law is less important, we're going to lose both. We're giving Orban the perfect excuse not to stick to the rule of law either. We're not encouraging Poland to look after refugees. No, we're encouraging the Minister of Justice to throw out the last judges. And we're really encouraging the member states not to stick to the rules. That cannot be our answer to Putin's war, that we give up the rule of law.
Next is die Kollegin
Thank you very much. And next is Ms. Wisela Lima.
L'état de droit doit être respecté.
The rule of law must be respected. The President of the Commission has promised this, and it's a matter of principle that she should keep her word. Within the European Union, we see Hungary and Poland, and what we're trying to do is protect the Hungarian and Polish people and find ways to convince these countries to find their way back to the rule of law. If they can't be convinced to carry out the judicial reforms that we want to see, then perhaps we can have mediation through to the green light through the recovery plan, because this demands judiciary reforms, without which the funds should not be paid. It's, however, a rhetorical question, because the conditions must be respected. The deadlines are set out, and when it comes to substance, there's no difference here between announcing the conditions or saying that the recovery plan will not be accepted unless the judicial reforms have been carried out. If that were to convince the Polish government to act, then we should support Madam von der Leyen. When I hear some people saying that if you look at the war in Ukraine from Russia, we have to ensure that Putin doesn't lose face, I find it very difficult to accept. I also find it difficult to understand that when we're trying to convince the European Union government that they have to respect rule of law, then some won't allow the types of rhetoric that would allow the Polish government to be subject to our conditions. Having said this, I would not be able to accept European Union money going to Poland without the required judiciary reforms having taken place. Thank you.
Merci. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Fernandez.
Presidenta, Comisión.
President, Commission, Council. This is a key legislature within the European Union for the future of the Union. In barely a few years we have seen Brexit, we have then faced COVID, and now we are facing a war on our very own borders that also threatens liberal democracy on our continent. But liberal democracy is also being attacked from within, and has been for a number of years now by certain governments. And this Parliament wants to see democratic conditionality introduced in the regulation before the recovery and resilience plans are implemented. We also have a specific regulation to ensure that aid is conditional on the rule of law requirements. These crises, these critical moments that we've experienced in recent years, are coming to a head with the current Polish government. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has changed a great deal in the European Union, and it seems that it could even be changing some things in Poland. But at the moment, the Commission and the Union have to be firmer than ever in their stance, and we have been in recent years, certainly, because it's only if we stand firm on our democratic values that we will be able to ensure that certain governments within the European Union will respect the rule of law in line with the EU regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kunke is next.
Tack, fru talman.
Thank you very much, President. Are all citizens of the European Union equally important? If so, how do we allow millions of Poles not to have the same possibilities and opportunities as us? Polish activists who are fighting for basic human rights risk to be put before the courts because of the Polish judicial system, which even the Court of Justice wants to be reformed. The people who pay the greatest price for our failure to do the right thing is the people who suffer most are the Poles who fight for Polish rights. This is a disgrace for the European Union and for the Commission, because in recognizing the Polish plans, the Commission is clearing the way for an authoritarian regime where our tax money is used to suppress people.
Next is Mr. Bilcik.
Madam President, colleagues, the decision to endorse Poland's recovery and resilience plan was neither easy, nor is it a blank check. The approval of this plan is linked to clear commitments by Poland on rule of law issues and the independence of the judiciary. A first payment will only be possible when the new law is in force and ticks all the boxes under this contract. This is a direct quote from the European Commission President, and frankly, the most important aspect of this plan. The plan indeed is a contract with mutual obligations, and the ball is now in Warsaw's hands. The money allocated to Poland is linked directly to specific milestones and targets, clearly outlining the Commission's expectations, our European expectations, and they must be fully met. Will it be an easy conversation with Warsaw? For most governments, the answer would be yes. Sadly, as the Polish ruling party has showed us in recent years, the current Polish government tends to create obstacles, likes to bend the rules to the maximum, even break them. I will always stress and repeat here, Poland can do much more and much better if there is will and true commitment to work on remedies by the ruling majority. Now the European Commission must follow up on this decision with full diligence, dear colleagues. Steps that can unlock the disbursement of EU funds rest with the Polish government. The leadership in Warsaw must take clear-cut decisions that will lead to general confidence in the independence and fairness of the Polish justice system. As we focus on the facts on the ground, I hope that all of those responsible for necessary changes are going to put the interests of Polish citizens above political egos and more petty fights with Europe. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Als nächstes.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Marques.
Muito obrigada, Presidente. A Comissão Europeia como
Thank you, President. The European Commission is guardian of the treaties and as such has a responsibility to ensure that European Union legislation is respected. And here today we are talking about the rule of law conditionality regulation. The situation is a complex one. Polish society, as we see in other countries in the region, are making incredible efforts to try to integrate 4 million citizens who are fleeing the war in Ukraine. The European Union has to make its effort. The Commission could try to do something to ensure that only the payments are made that are necessary for integration of the Ukrainian citizens into Poland and nothing more. The Commission should keep the pressure on in order to ensure that Poland becomes a country based on the rule of law. Citizens are making all of these efforts to take in Ukrainians, and if we adopt this plan, then we won't be supporting them.
Thank you. Sergei Lagodinsky is next.
Herr Vizepräsident,
Vice President, we're grateful to the Polish citizens for their support for Ukrainian refugees. That's real-life solidarity and European values. But European values are not just welcoming others. What's the point of being grateful to Polish citizens if they have to fear that judgment will be handed down on them for by judges who are corrupt. So are we saying that the Polish citizens don't need to worry about judges anymore? That's a question. The money has now been promised. Now we could get excited about it and get upset about it. But let me ask a question. What is the strategy? We're seeing a tapestry of half-hearted measures. We're seeing a competition between different DGs. We're seeing big announcements and small steps. Something has to happen. The Commission needs to sit down with this Parliament and work out a joint strategy. We need two things. First of all, we need to be clear with clear about Poland, and if we're going to give Poland money, then it's got to be on certain conditions. Only that way can we make progress, only that way can we save democracy.
Thank you. Mr. Lewandowski is next. Madam President, Poland is a country on the front. Russian missiles are falling just the other side of our border. Poles have welcomed refugees into their homes. The Commission has taken note of what is happening. Dealing with judicial repression goes beyond the conditions that have been set. Much more needs to be done. There is currently chaos in the Polish economy. Two additional conditions, though, must be met. 1/3 of the funding must go to local authorities, and not in the form of loans, because local authorities, since recent pseudo-reforms, are in financial trouble. And the funds should not be used for political and electoral purposes, and we have terrible experience in that respect. The national plan will only help Poland, Polish society and the Polish economy if these principles are respected. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Heinäluoma.
Arvoisa puhemies.
Madam President, the European Union is not just the economy and single markets. Europe is also about values and equal rights for citizens. A commitment to shared values, democracy, rule of law, free media, human rights is more important than ever when we see what's happening outside the Union, for example, in Russia. The EU should practice what it preaches. Recovery funding for Poland should only be released when Poland has met the rule of law conditions, and the EU Parliament should stick to its earlier positions. Every EU citizen should be able to hope that citizens' democratic rights will be realized in practice. It is not acceptable to send money to places where the rulers are putting it into their own pockets and building machinery of repression. Fundamental rights must be protected everywhere. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Peksha.
Dobré odpoledne, dámy a pánové. Já se bohužel musím přiznat, že to vidím tak, že Evropská komise
Good evening, everybody. The way I see it, the European Commission has failed. Instead of defending the rule of law in Europe, the Commission has sold it down the river. There were conditions, and instead of respecting the rulings of the Court of Justice and the advice of its own experts, the Commission has decided to pay out the money. Yes, I, like many others, are grateful for the help ordinary Poles are giving to refugees, but the PiS government is destroying the judiciary in Poland. The judiciary is a fundamental component of democracy and the rule of law. If Poland carries on down this road, it will end up a kleptocratic dictatorship like Russia. It is essential that countries play by the rules that they have signed up to. We don't need a commission that doesn't defend this position, and we'll have to find another one. Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Kohut.
Pani przewodnicząca, PiS jest tak saper, który podkłada bomby, później je rozbraja.
Madam President, PiS is like someone who plants a bomb, then defuses it and expects applause, like an arsonist who sets fire to his own house, then puts out the fire and puts in an insurance claim. And Ziobro is like a thief, caught red-handed, who's innocent because he didn't steal as much as was expected. And Kaczynski is like Nero, setting fire to his own country. Polish people are suffering from the meteoric rise in prices of fuel and energy. We've lost 5 billion euro and valuable time. I'm very glad, Madam President, that you have shown understanding, but you have to check to make sure that this money isn't wasted, because you can't trust them over there. Thank you very much. That brings us to Catch the Eye. We've got 6 requests, but only 2 are present. So Ms. Kemper has the floor first.
Bardzo dziękuję, pani przewodnicząca.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just want to say to Sophie in 't Veld that you can adopt all sorts of resolutions. You can say the planet is square, the grass is blue. You're talking about us being a mini Russia. We've been occupied by Russia. Our elite has been murdered by the Russians, and so you should be careful how you refer to us. As we've seen, the Polish opposition is impotent, is desperate. It's losing all the elections, be they European, presidential or general. Even if we met 1 million milestones, just because we're a conservative government, we would be criticized. We would be criticized for sticking to our values. Finally, Madam President, I want to address that Polish opposition. I think that the country in the next elections will teach you a lesson for the way you're treating our country. And the next speaker is Ms. Daly.
Thank you, President. As far as I'm concerned, the Commission's record on rule of law was pretty abysmal to begin with. But the decision to release the National Recovery Plan funds to Poland, justified on the basis of the ludicrous charade of a meaningless bill put forward by the President to amend the Disciplinary Chamber, really takes the biscuit. But let's be honest about it, because contrary to all the claims from the Commission of no compromise with rule of law, your record actually is one of consistent compromise in this area. You've been incredibly slow to begin with. When you do move, you move in a partisan way, correctly taking action against Poland and Hungary, but not taking action, yes, against countries like Spain, legitimising then those in Poland and Hungary who do want to continue with the status quo. And now this, it's an absolute joke. Nothing has changed in terms of Poland. This U-turn, unless reversed, will certainly go down as an historic red line crossed with lasting repercussions.
Vielen Dank. Für die Kommission darf ich nun Herrn.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Executive Vice President Dombrovskis on behalf of the Commission.
Madam Chair, Honourable Presidency, Honourable Members, allow me to deliver the closing remarks also on behalf of Commissioner Gentiloni, who would have liked to be here. Let me thank you for this fruitful and lively debate. We have heard you loud and clear, and we share many of your very legitimate concerns. The Commission is fully committed to its role as a guardian of the treaties, now as much as ever. Russia's war aggression in Ukraine does but strengthen our conviction that our liberal democracies, based on the rule of law and fundamental rights and freedoms, must prevail. We will therefore make no compromise when it comes to protecting rule of law, the EU's founding principles and values, or its financial interests. For the Polish recovery and resilience plan to succeed, we have to make sure that every single euro is spent in line with those principles. This is why we will monitor and assess carefully its implementation of judiciary reforms included in the plan before any payment is made. This is key to support the economic and social resilience of Poland, for Poland to emerge stronger from the crisis at the time where the Polish people have also shown their extraordinary generosity towards those fleeing Ukraine. It's also essential to ensure the full credibility of Recovery Resilience Facility and our joint European recovery plan. We should be very clear on what this positive assessment of Polish plan means and what this does not mean. It means that the plan fulfills all the assessment criteria under the RRF regulation. It does not mean that all issues related to rule of law are settled. With regard to the legal proceedings before the Court of Justice, the Commission will continue to execute from Poland the daily penalty payments until full compliance with the order of 14th of July 2021. The Commission will not close an infringement or ask the Court to discontinue a case before Poland fully and effectively addresses all the issues that were identified by the Commission. The RRF can only complement the other EU instruments specifically intended to pursue the respect of the rule of law and protection of the financial interests of the Union. I am referring to infringement proceedings against Poland relating to violations of judicial independence. I am also referring to preliminary reference before the Court of Justice. Furthermore, the procedure under Article 7 of the Treaty of the European Union, which has been triggered vis-à-vis Poland in December 2017, is still ongoing. The Commission will also soon publish its yearly Rule of Law report. Finally, the Rule of Law Conditionality Regulation provides an additional instrument to protect Union's financial instruments. Honourable members, questions were also raised on the European Commission proceedings, referring to the number of members of College voting against. To be precise, there were 2 members of College voting against. This is not the first time vote is taking place in a College, something clearly foreseen in the rules of procedure. The positive assessment of Poland's recovery and resilience plan is a decisive moment to support the Polish recovery and the economy, even more so in a difficult context created by the war at its borders. However, it is the only first step towards effectively disbursing any funds to Poland. As reaffirmed by President today, no money from the Recovery and Resilience Facility will be disbursed to Poland until the crucial milestones to strengthen the independence of judiciary are met. It will therefore be up to Poland to live up to the commitments under its Recovery and Resilience Plan, as it's the case for all Member States. Thank you.
Herr Vizepräsident, herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Now we're going to hear from Chrysula Zacharopoulou on behalf of Council.
Je vais d'abord rappeler, mesdames.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Parliament, I would like to start by reminding you that the Council and Member States attach the greatest importance of our shared objective, which is to protect and strengthen the rule of law throughout our European Union. As I said at the beginning of this debate, the French presidency of the European Union has put the rule of law on the Council's agenda repeatedly. The French presidency has spoken in plenary and in front of the Libe Committee a number of times to inform the European Parliament of the actions being undertaken within the Council. You rightly have stated a number of times that the rule of law is the beating heart of our union and our democracy, as well as the European project. We have to protect this precious asset, particularly when liberty is under threat at our doors. It's therefore important to fully implement the rulings of the Court of Justice, particularly in the when it comes to the Disciplinary Chamber of the Polish Supreme Court. A number of you have stated that Poland and the Polish people have shown extraordinary solidarity towards Ukrainian refugees. The Recovery and Resilience Facility represents bold, coordinated efforts at European level as a reaction to COVID-19. We're now moving from crisis management to economic recovery. Ambitious political programs and the financing proposed at both European and national level will contribute towards ensuring a sustainable and inclusive recovery. That will allow Europe to achieve its double green and digital transition and become more resilient. National plans have to contribute towards overcoming challenges that have been flagged up in the country recommendations. These countries include rule of law for some member states. The Council will continue to follow up implementation of this facility and, if necessary, will provide political impetus to ensure that the full potential of this instrument is used. The Council is ready to look into the Commission's proposal on evaluating the recovery and resilience plans for Poland. The Council will continue to ensure that, as for previous plans, all plans meet the regulatory requirements in light of a positive evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you. 6 motions for resolution have been tabled to wind up the debate. The debate is closed and the vote will take place on Thursday. The next item on the agenda is the report by McAllister and Loiseau on the European Union's security and defence policy. At this point, I should say all the things I usually say about blue cards and voting and so on, because I think you're aware of it all. David McAllister has the floor.